how the Ukraine war started. A bunch of Ivy League, State Department, CIA people concocted that thing, made bad decision, senseless decision after senseless decision after senseless decision. And, you know,
can you elaborate? I mean, we have this entire portion towards the end of the interview, but we can crank it out right now.
So the Ukraine war was started by...
You say this is the biggest propaganda war of all time, correct?
Yes, it should be called the propaganda war. The fighting's real. Everything we've been told about it is basically a lie. And every piece of history that shows it's a lie has been either kicked under the rug or lied about too. So how the war started when the Obama administration, I don't say U.S. because the Ukraine war could not have started with any other administration, because it couldn't have started without the press as part of the group that was going to provide cover for starting it. And they were all in on the start of the Ukraine war. But the U.S. Obama administration, Victoria Nuland, Jake Sullivan, John O'Brien, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden had one job. You can look in his archives as vice president. His one job was Ukraine. And Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan, his deputy, were the architects of the start of the war. And the way it started was the State Department and CIA non-elected officials, along with their counterparts in the EU, Ukrainian politicians, and George Soros's Open Society Foundation, along with the neo-Nazi ultranationalists, created the fake Maidan protests. You can still go online. I checked before I came. Videos are still there, 2014, 15. Look at Maidan protests. You'll see brand new GP mediums in the background. You'll see them serving soup. You'll notice that everyone has these same orange hard hats on, distributed to them. The weapons, you'll see weapons, the same common weapons being held by the ultranationalist neo-Nazis. And then there are interviews. There's BBC and German TV interviews with Ukrainian protesters. And one of them, all the guy does is ask, why are you protesting? And every single individual that they question says the same thing. I'm here because they told me to be here and I'm getting paid. And so Victoria Nuland admitted afterwards that the U.S. spent $5 billion in USAID funds to bribe all these people and to make it happen. And in February of 2014, the culmination of the Maidan protests was the violent overthrow of the Viktor Yanukovych government, the duly elected government of Ukraine. He was elected not just by Eastern Ukrainians, but by Western Ukrainians. And his election was validated by the UN. But for some reason, they decided we got to overthrow him. And the plan, and this is where this senseless decision-making comes from, and this is all in cables. It's in State Department, CIA cables, and in...
Just for the audience, cables are basically secure emails.
Yes, good description. It's all in those. They believed that by overthrowing Yanukovych, installing their Ukrainian puppet politicians, and then starting a ethnic war in eastern Ukraine, which is populated by almost 100% ethnic Russians, that by doing that, this would cause so much unrest in Russia that the Russian people would rise up and overthrow Putin. That was the plan. And, you know, when you read that, when you read the cables, when you see that, it's like these, you know, Ivy League, never been in a war, never been in anything real in their life. It's like they were like kids playing with matches, completely unaware of the potential unintended consequences of throwing those matches into a pile of leaves or something soaked in gas. And what happened afterwards is a classic law of unintended consequences. They had no plan for after they overthrew the government. And in the power vacuum, because they had no plan, the neo-Nazis took over the Ukrainian government.
They had no contingency plans?
No contingencies. And that's why Crimea caught them so by surprise. So you also online, you can go on any of your favorite search engines and just look up Victoria Nuland, Gregory Pyatt. He was the ambassador. She was the head of State Department for the overthrow. Their phone call was intercepted by the Russians and then published on YouTube. Initially, it's on all search engines now. Their phone call is them talking about which Ukrainian politicians that they controlled would be the next prime minister. And this is before the violent overthrow. It's like 2 weeks before. So they're on record talking about who to install in the new government. So it's not a theory. There's a massive trail of evidence that shows exactly what happened, to include open source intelligence, the videotapes that show what's about to happen. So when the neo-Nazis controlled the 5 key ministries of the Ukrainian government, to include the Ministry of Defense. John O'Brien was the head of CIA then. He flew in the day after they overthrew the Yanukovych government, met with the head of the Ukrainian intelligence and the head of MI6. And the very next day, they began the ethnic war on eastern Ukraine, which was really one of the most horrific humanitarian violations in modern history. They just began shelling the civilian areas with artillery and mortars. And again, it's all on video. You can see grandmothers crying in the streets with dead, spouses and dead children, and saying, why is our own country doing this to us? Why is our own government doing this to us? The eastern Ukrainian oblasts that have since voted for independence and autonomy, then independence and reunification with Russia, so Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, all 3 of them would have stayed in Ukraine, but they had no choice. Ethnic cleansing began, and between 2014 and 2021, 14,000 ethnic Russian civilians were killed in eastern Ukraine, and most of them by artillery, mortar, and drone attacks. And all the hospitals, horrific. The ethnic Russians petitioned the UN to come in and investigate, begged for the UN to investigate. They wouldn't do it. We should have, as the U.S., if Trump always says, if I had been president, this wouldn't have happened. But any objective president, this was grounds for sending forces in. This was worse than Bosnia, worse than Rwanda, any of those places. We should have sent people in to stop it, but no one would do that. And the killing just continued, as well as the cover-up. Most Western Ukrainians still to this day believe what the propaganda said happened, that Maidan protest was an organic protest, that Yanukovych fled because of his corruption. He knew he was going to get busted. He fled the country. And then they say that Putin invaded Ukraine, and he did not. So I told you 14,000 dead. Crimea was the first in May of 2014. They knew what was happening. They instantly voted for independence. And in the vote, I think 89% of people voted, and of the population voted, and something like 85% voted to secede from Ukraine.
Shit.
Yeah, and Russia, the part of Crimea that's so important is the Sevastopol naval base. It's Russia's only warm water naval base. They had a contract with Ukraine to keep that till 2045. They just left the base and helped the Crimeans secure Crimea. But Donetsk and Luhansk begged for Russian help. Putin demurred. He was incredibly conscientious about not pissing off NATO, if you can believe that, because NATO is, actively working to undermine him, and he's not helping these ethnic Russians because he doesn't want it to look like, he's invading or that he's provoking NATO. So they set their own elections up in the summer of 2014, and the same results. 80+% voted and 80% voted for independence. So why is that important? Because today, when you hear people say, why would we give the Donbass basin back to Russia? They invaded. Well, you're not giving Donbass back to Russia. Dun stands for coal, Bass stands for basin. So Donbass is the coal basin. And within it is Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts or provinces. And both of those voted for independence. They had no other choice. After all the killing in 2015, the president, the newly installed president of Ukraine, outlawed the Russian language, outlawed the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is like the sister to the Russian Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church was founded in Kyiv. Russia considers Kyiv the holiest of holy cities. It's like Jerusalem to them. That's why they've been so circumspect on the bombing of Kyiv, because it's a holy city. But the Ukrainians forfeited any right to Eastern Ukraine when they started killing them, when they took away all their basic human rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You can't practice religion. You can't speak your language.
Yeah.
He stopped the pensions of all.
What the hell are you supposed to speak?
Yeah, exactly. Sign language. I mean, if you read the UN Charter on Human Rights, all those things are like the staples. And if you violate those, the UN Charter more or less says the country has a right to, for self-governance, to break away from whoever is doing that to it. So it's, again, clear-cut case. It's not theory. And then on the invasion, I liken what Russia did to, think of it this way. You can technically call it an invasion. Just like if you're walking down the street and you come up to a vestibule and see your buddy getting mugged inside the vestibule, but on the door to the vestibule of the building, it says no trespassing. Well, you fucking kick that door in, smack that mugger on the head, toss him out, and save your buddy. Did you just trespass? Well, I guess technically you did, but no judge, jury, or common sense human being is going to say you shouldn't have trespassed. It's the same thing Russia did. 14,000 ethnic Russians slaughtered, begging him for help, begging for humanitarian assistance, and finally, he just broke into that vestibule to save his people, ethnic Russians, and so calling him the invader, calling him the instigator, or Russia, just doesn't hold any water. It doesn't make sense as long as you cut through the propaganda, and that's kind of why I got involved. I've been to Kyiv, I've been to Ukraine. I love Ukraine. I love the Ukrainian people. I've never been to Russia, would love to go there. And I have buddies. I have a buddy in the State Department, two buddies in the agency, and a buddy who's over there as a long-term contractor. And they, one night, said, hey, let's call Pete and tell him this stuff and find out what he thinks we should do. And so they didn't call me. They just called and set up a meeting. We met at LAX, outside LAX, and they told me everything. And I was like, holy shit. Now, every one of these guys is still active. And, one reason they came to me was, can you get the word out? And I was like, yeah, I've got a duty to get the word out. Right now we're at about 1.25 million Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. So back to
that many?
Yep.
1.25 million?
Yep. The
Holy
Ukrainian mods
shit.
database was hacked about 4 months ago, and the number they had then was 1.2. I'm giving them benefit of doubt. They've been losing about 1,000 men a day every day of 2025.
Wow.
So it's incredible numbers. You can, I'm on about 5 or 6 different Telegram channels that I subscribe to, and there's some great independent reporters. I think you might have had one of them on, Patrick Lancaster. Did you have him on? Okay, maybe he's on Tucker or something. I probably shouldn't have brought that up, but
All good.
yeah. So
We should look into him.
yeah, he's an independent reporter. He's been over there from the beginning, and the first thing that strikes you when you watch one of his reports is, where the fuck is the press? Why is there no mainstream global media press coverage of the Ukraine war? Why have we not seen a single? Remember, they forced the U.S. military to embed them in Iraq, Afghanistan, and demanded it. Because not because they wanted to cover it, because that's the quickest formula for getting a Pulitzer Prize and getting, looked on favorably as a journalist. But from the beginning, the question has to be, why is there no coverage of the Ukraine war? And I'll tell you why there's none. Because if they cover it, they'll expose the propaganda stories that are happening. And the first way is the entire war has been fought in eastern Ukraine. So every city that gets taken by the Russians in eastern Ukraine, they're the liberators, and the people come out celebrating when the Russians come in and telling them about the hell they've been living through with the Ukrainian army occupying their town.
No matter where you're watching the Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this at all, anything, please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, head to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a review.